one who needs no introduction, but I've been tasked with the job, so I'll try as hard as I can. I want to thank Michael and Sharon Cronenberg for sponsoring this morning's lecture and breakfast, and his sponsor in memory of Mr. Lou Herman, and Chover Aryeh Yaakov Eliezer and Naftali L'Shalom, and Mrs. Sarah Thurm, Sarah Rivka Basra Mordechai L'Shalom. Lou Herman's Yurtzeit is today, and Sarah Thurm's Yurtzeit is coming up this week. It's tonight. And the Neshama should have an Aliyah. The topic today is certainly timely, and I'm reminded of the advice that's often given by therapists to those who are suffering from anxiety, which is to try to remember a time where you went through a similar situation and you came through it. And as a people, we've been through a lot of similar situations over the centuries and the millennia. And oftentimes when I am faced with anxiety over the state of our current world, it's Rabbi Wein who's in my head. It's Rabbi Wein who's taught me, and I think all of us here in this room, and I would dare say much of the Jewish world, that we have a long storied history, that we've seen this before. And that everyone who's here this morning is testament to the fact that we've made it through. And it's times like that where I realize how much Rabbi Wein's perspective has influenced and shaped my perspective on the world and the way that we view things. Certainly here in our shul, our entire natures made up by the seeds which Rabbi Wein planted. He's gone on to educate all of Judaism to recognize where we come from so we can know where we're going to. And it's my honor and pleasure to introduce to you Rabbeinu V'Rabbeinu, Rabbi Berel Wein.
Response to Rabbi Gottlieb. There's a great Jewish anecdote about a chassid who wanted to have a son. He wanted to have a male heir. So he went to the Rebbe and he said, give me a segula, give me a magical potion that will guarantee that my wife will give birth to a boy. So the Rebbe said to him, listen, go out and buy a chicken and take the comb off of the face of the chicken and grind it into a powder and have a sheikhet shech the chicken, and then you mix the powder with water, and I'm giving you a parchment with a blessing on it, and you mix it all together, and your wife will wear it for 9 months. And the Rebbe told him to do it. He went and he did it, and as you can imagine, he had a girl. So he came back to the Rebbe. So the Rebbe said, what color chicken did you get? So he said, I got a brown chicken. He said, hey, that's the wrong chicken. You got to get a white chicken. So he got a white chicken. He went through the whole thing again. 9 months later, he comes back to the Rebbe. She had a girl. The Rebbe says to him, who was the sheikhet? So he says, the sheikhet was Klein. He said, hey, that's the wrong sheikhet. You got to get gross, should be the sheikhet. So he goes and gets a white chicken, and he gets gross as the sheikhet, and then she has a girl. He comes back to the Rebbe once more. buy the chicken from? He said, I bought it from Levi. He said, no, that's the wrong guy. You should have bought it from him. You should have bought it from Cohen. So now he goes out, he goes through the whole thing again, and another girl. He comes back to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe says to him, oy vey, you went to the wrong Rebbe. This shul is privileged to have the right Rebbe. You have Rabbi Gottlieb as your Marta Austria. You really have a treasure and a gem, and you should appreciate that. And we should always hear good news one from another in all facets of our existence. As was mentioned, today's words here are Lili Nishmas, and Mr. Lou Herman, Eliezer Yaakov Chover, Eliezer Yaakov, and Mrs. Sarah Thurn, Max Thurn's mother, Aleh Shalom, Sarah Rivka. The Shomas should have an aliyah, and we should treasure their memories and be strengthened by it. Charles Dickens, in his famous Tale of Two Cities, began with an immortal sentence that it was the best of all times and the worst of all times. And we could say that about our time as well, in many respects. But it certainly is a time of great change, when things that we thought were, so to speak, set in stone, no longer are so certain. And the multitude of problems that surround us, if we view them constantly and in concert, so then they are frightening. So I'd like to divide this immortal lecture into two different facets. One is general, the non-Jewish world as well, and one is the Jewish world, which is also undergoing a tremendous change. The general world is a very dangerous one, simply because of the fact that the technology of killing people is so advanced that it has no limits. And it is so available that you don't need a license to build a bomb or to build a rocket. Anybody can do it. And when we're talking about a world of billions of people, so there always are a few people who are on the fringe. And those people who are on the fringe are ones that we should definitely be afraid of. The man that's running North Korea is an enormous danger to the world. He's, I'm not a psychiatrist, but I think he's mentally unhinged. But he has nuclear weapons. And he has rockets, and he has ICBMs. And no one knows what ticks him off. That's a fearsome thing. And my generation experienced already what someone who was pathologically unstable could do to the world. 80 million people were killed in the Second World War, one way or another, between Stalin and Hitler. So that's a very dangerous thing in the world. And we have an uncertain president of the United States that we don't know exactly where he wants to go and how he wants to get there. So if you read the newspapers, which is something that I studiously attempt to avoid, I mean, if you want to ruin your day, just,
Get the news.
So, where are we going? What's compound the problem is the fact that Western civilization has gone through a sea change in terms of values. I once was a student in the American public school system in Chicago. So in elementary school, second grade, there was a boys' entrance and a girls' entrance in public school. And the entire value system that existed in American society 60, 70 years ago is no longer here. Not only no longer here, it's been turned on its head. Things that were once acceptable and today are politically incorrect, and things that once were considered immoral today are at the top of the list. Chazal tell us that a great Tana had a near-death experience. And in the near-death experience, he visited heaven. And then when he recovered, so his colleagues asked him, "What did you see in heaven? Tell us what it looks like there." So he said, "Olam hafuch raisi." I saw the world is upside down. Elyonim lamata, tachtonim lamala. People here who are considered to be on top, there they sit on the bottom. And people here who don't have much respect, there they sit at the top of the table. Olam hafuch, world that is completely opposite. And the rabbi answered him, no, you made a mistake. Olam borer raisa. You saw the world for the first time correctly. You saw it clearly. Because the world here is confused. It's not clear. And in thrashing about, all sorts of difficulties are created. It'll take a long time to sort out. The Jewish people, Chazal especially, in the time of the Second Temple, and in the period immediately after the destruction of the Second Temple, lived in the time of Roman culture, which basically was Greek culture. Greek culture was homosexuality, was sexual depravity, was violence, was a world of slavery. Now it had many glorious aspects to it as well. It was art and the theater and architecture, and music, and drama. It was democracy, which is a Greek word. But in that world of values, Chazal, the rabbis shut the door. And therefore they said the famous statement, Chochma bagoyim tani. If somebody comes and tells you that the world has Chochma is wisdom, knowledge, technology, there's a Sorbonne, there's an Oxford, there's a Harvard, Tamim, believe them, that's true. Torah bagoyim al tani. But if you think that that's the key to a moral state, if you think that's the key to a peaceful, serene life existence, if you think that that is a mission statement, I'll tell you, don't believe that. That is not true. The statistics show that over a third of all of the commandants of the Nazi death camps were either PhDs or MDs. There are people with Chochmah. But people with Chochmah can easily become murderers. Because there's no Torah, there's no moral inhibition. And the entire structure of Western society today has been to remove any moral inhibitions. my good friend, Rabbi Dr. Abraham Twersky. So he was a psychiatrist in Pittsburgh for many decades. He was famous for his work on addiction. And because of his work on addiction, he had a lot to do with the Catholic Church. Because alcoholism and other problems that permeates the church. And he said that the cardinal told him that you're the only psychiatrist in Pittsburgh that we can send a priest for counseling, because anyone else that will send him to will immediately say, well, your first problem is religion. So in a world where that's the first problem, so it's very hard. It's hard to raise children. It's hard to have an educational system. It's hard to be part of society. So Chazal, we're faced pretty much with what we are faced with. Are we part of society? A society that, to a great extent, stands against every value and principle that we hold dear. And that imposes its will upon us. Or do we just close the door and everybody move to New Square? Which is also not immune from the problems. Chazal somehow navigated it. And the Gemara says it's a very interesting Gemara, and I've always thought of it, why we never followed it. The Gemara says Ram Gamliel of Yavne, the second Ram Gamliel, had 1,000 Talmidim, the Gemara says. He had 1,000 students, 500 of whom he taught only Greek culture, and 500 of whom he taught only Torah. And I always wondered, what in the world is the Gemara talking about? And he told me that he had 1,000 students and he taught them all Torah and Derech Eretz, or he taught them exclusively Torah. Then that's a program that I understand. But I don't understand a program that half the student body is studying only secular studies, and half the student body is studying only Torah. So I once heard from a great man that he thought that Rabbi Gamliel realized that he needed both. But he also realized that it's very hard to have both in one person, in one section of society alone. And therefore he chose that method. And he felt that if he had the 500 that were studying Chochmas Yevonis, Greek culture, but he had them in the confines of his Beis Medrash, in the confines of his influence, that somehow it would work out. If we look over Jewish history, there's been a constant struggle on this issue from the time of Ram Gamliel till our time. There has never been any unanimity regarding study of philosophy, secular studies, etc., etc. Jewish people have never agreed. So some are going one way, some are going another way. And that struggle continues until today. You raise children, grandchildren in today's world, what do you tell them? What's necessary for them? So we've had inverse ideas. There are children that from the time of that they are very young, they're inculcated with the idea that they're going to spend the rest of their life somehow studying Torah and being supported by the Jewish community. And then there are those who are inculcated from their earliest years that they're going to go to Harvard and win a Nobel Prize in physics. I would imagine it depends who the child is. But the truth of the matter is that the Jewish people have never decided how to raise their children. And have never decided exclusively which way we are going to go. And a lot of it, therefore, depends on the outside world. What kind of outside world is it? So there was a time, as I mentioned, when if you went to the American public school system, you got a lot of positive religious values. I mean, I had, when I went to public school till 7th grade, I had all Irish spinster school teachers who, didn't mind rapping you across the knuckles, and it taught you how to read and write, and taught you not to lie, and taught you all sorts of wonderful things that were in line with being Jewish. The only thing that wasn't in line with it were Christmas carols. I have my famous Rabbi Twersky story that he was in a car. I was in the car with him, and there were two great Rosh Yeshiva in the car with us. And Twersky, who always likes to stir the drink, said to me, he said, Berel, you and I, we had a great education. We went to public school. So I told him, yes, we went to public school. So one of the Rosh Yeshiva turns around and he says, ich habe echt gegangen in public school. So Twersky looks at him askance, but he said, you went. The other one, who's the last man in the world that you would suspect of such a heresy, said, I also went to public school. Twersky said, I don't believe you. He said, I'm telling you, I went to public school. So Twersky says, prove it. Sing Silent Night. Which all of us can. But public school was, value-wise, was in order with us. It was based on the Ten Commandments. It resonated, which is not true today at all. So the problem today is a great problem. And all of the Jewish educational institutions, in the Orthodox world certainly, are wrestling with the problem, whether they say they are or not. And since the Lord made us different people, and there's no one size fits all, so it takes a great deal of, I don't know, even tolerance is a word, but it takes a very broad view to be able to deal with the Jewish world today and with the Jewish children today. That is a very, very crucial issue in my estimation. And I don't think it's easily solved, and I don't think it's rapidly solved, but it is undergoing changes. And that brings me to speak a little about the state of Israel and Jewish society in Israel. The great joker in the deck, the thing that we have nothing to compare it with, why you cannot learn, so to speak, exactly from past Jewish history to present Jewish problems, is the existence of the state of Israel. Chazal and the Posuk of B'shuv Hashem et Shivat Zion, Hayinu kecholmim, we are but dreamers. So Chazal say, what does it mean but dreamers? So there are different types of dreams. There are dreams that are pleasant, and there are dreams that are not so pleasant. There are dreams that we get up in the morning and we remember the dream. In most dreams, we get up in the morning and we don't realize what we dreamt. That's the state of Israel. It's a dream. A bunch of tailors and shoemakers came and made a state. After 2,000 years of exile, not only made a state, they were able to absorb millions of Jews from different cultures all over the world and make it work. It's the miracle of the ages. Chazal say, Kosher Yom Shel Kibbutz Goliath. We had a Jew from Afghanistan, and a Jew from Russia, and a Jew from New York, and a Jew from France, and they're all fighting for the same parking space. Both figuratively and literally. And it's had such an effect on the Jewish world. The Jewish community in America could not be what it is if it were not for the fact that the state of Israel existed. And it's a work in progress. Changes. The state of Israel was originally founded as a socialist, secular state. To a certain extent, as an anti-religious state. The founders of the state so hated the exile and the exile mentality of the Jews that they were willing to throw out the baby with the bathwater. But it didn't turn out to be that kind of a state. It turned out to be a very traditional place, a very Jewish place. I would hazard to say that most of American Jewry was unaware that the 15th of Shvat passed upon us. In Israel, it's a big deal. Everything's a big deal. The whole calendar, the whole rhythm of life is the values of the Jewish people. And I'm talking, an observance is it's a spectrum. It's a spectrum. And the Jewish state represents something. The Jewish state itself finds itself in a conundrum because it declares itself to be a democratic Jewish state. And many times those two words of description contradict each other. You want to be completely democratic, you're not going to be very Jewish. You want to be very Jewish, you're not going to be democratic. And that's the fault line that exists in the country. That's the tectonic plagues plates that rub against each other. That's the Supreme Court, that's the Knesset, that's the politics. Because we're still trying to find our way. And it'll be a long time in coming again because it took us a long time to get into this mess. You know, it takes 40 miles to turn around an aircraft carrier. So it takes time to turn around a country and a set of values and people. But the fact that the state exists, and the fact that it has power, I mean, it's almost a laugh if you stop to think of. I mean, when I was a child, If somebody would have told me that a Jew could fly an airplane, I wouldn't have believed it. Nobody would tell you that. The Israeli Air Force is the equal, if not better, than any other Air Force in the world. So today we accept that as being fact. The whole world accepts it as being fact. You have a piece of Israel in every one of your phones. Israel, whatever it wants to do, it can do. But the Lord gave us natural gas. So as one of our politicians famously put it, we always had hot air, but now we got natural gas. What a gift. Israel is energy independent. Turkey is buying, Jordan is going to buy, Egypt is going to buy. How did that happen? And a lot of the great things that happen seem to happen in spite of ourselves, not because of ourselves. Almost serendipitously, almost by accident. Because Ramos Machshavos B'lev Ish V'atzas Hashem Yisakun. The Lord apparently has a plan here. And it's very strange that God's plan does not necessarily conform to our preconceived ideas as to how things should work and how things should proceed. That's part of Hayinu Kecholmim. It's a dream, in the midst of a dream. Some people find the dream more pleasant than others. Other people find the dream unpleasant because it does not fit their preconceived notions. That's the problem of the left in the world. They have a notion as to how society should look. And they're angry that somehow Israel is not that society. And then there are other Jews who have a preconceived notion as to how God should bring about the salvation of the Jewish people. And if he has the temerity to do it in a way that's different than the way they wanted it to, so then they quit. They don't want it. But all of that really are fringe problems. Because the main issue is, how will the state develop? What kind of value system and value life it will adopt? How Jewish it will be while remaining democratic. That's a great issue. And that issue, again, will not go away rapidly or easily. But it is being addressed. There are many things that are being addressed in Israel that are below the surface. The problem with the Haredi workforce is slowly changing. You have more and more Haredi in the workforce. You even have more and more Haredi in the Israeli army. In the Israeli army, they're assigned almost exclusively to intelligence. A, because they're intelligent, and B, because it provokes less problems. But eventually you have to come to a solution there also, because not everybody can be in intelligence. And these are ongoing problems, day in and day out, of a changing society, of how we are attempting to build it, and the problems that we face. American Jewry is, I said, an example. I'll repeat it again here. The Shabbos Chol Hamoed, there is a great Haftorah, the Haftorah of the Novi Yechezkel. And another Yechezkel has a vision, and he sees a valley of dry bones. And the Lord asks him in the vision, will these bones be ever revived? And the Navi doesn't know what to answer. He says, God, well, you're the only one that knows. What am I going to do with the dry bones? And then the Tanakh describes for us that the bones start to line up. They become human skeletons. And then the skeletons become dressed in flesh and in muscle and sinew, skin. And then a great wind comes and infuses in them life. And they stand up. And the Novi hears the voice from heaven says, that's the Jewish people. So the Gemara in Sanhedrin, as is its wont, the Gemara asks a simple question. So what happened afterwards? You got 30,000 people that stood up. What happened to them? Because in Tanakh it doesn't say what happened to them. Maybe they're calling. So the Gemara gives two opinions, which is one of the great lessons of the Talmud, is that there's always another opinion. So one opinion is, Omdu al Ragleim, the Omdu Shira. They stood on their feet, they recited the Hallel, that the great miracle of being revived, and then they all dropped dead again. That's it. One time shot, one time miracle, done. Omar Rabbi Yehuda ben Pseira al Raglov, the great Rabbi Yehuda ben Pseira stood on his feet, and he said, Chas v'chalila, to say that. It's blasphemy to say that. Nosu Noshim, they got married. Yoldu Bonim, they had children. Vanimi b'nei b'nei. I'm descended from them. And a proof of the matter, Tefillin shalavi abo biyodi. I have my Zaydas tefillin in my hand. So you have here two opinions. One opinion is that they all dropped dead. Goodbye. And the other opinion is, what are you talking about? We're their children. So some Suffern says that both opinions are correct, as is usually the case in the Gemara and in life. It just depends on how you apply it. There are Jews that are revived and they drop dead again. After the Shoah, the Jewish people were revived. And one of his Rav told me his famous parable. He said that, God forbid, the parents have a child that's very ill, and they take the child to the hospital, and after all sorts of miraculous things, the child is able to come home and is on the road to recovery. So then the parents say to the child, you want ice cream every day, we'll give you ice cream. You want toys, whatever. For a period of time, whatever the child wants, the child gets. After a while, the parents realize that that'll ruin the child, so then they go back to being the normal, mean parents that we're supposed to be. So he said after the Shoah, the Jewish people came out of the hospital. I remember 47 and 48 looked like in Chicago. I remember Rabbi Austria came to my father's house to tell us how my uncle and aunt and my cousins were all killed by the Bolsheviks in 1940 in Lithuania. Ein Bayis Asher Ein Shomeis, everybody. We had no spirit, we had nothing. And the state of Israel came. So he said, so the Rebbe Shalom said, you want a state, I'll give you a state. You want money, I'll make you the most affluent community the Jewish world has ever seen. You want whatever you want, you can have. But it's only for a limited time. The window is not permanently open. So most of the Jewish world, or a great proportion of the Jewish world, drop dead again. That's what it is. You look at all the fearsome statistics today, and you look around, it's frightening. Gone completely. You don't know what you're talking about. The people in the book have no idea what book you're talking about. And on the other hand, against all odds and against all prevailing currents, the Torah world rebuilt itself in a way that was unimaginable 40, 50, 60 years ago. In 1953, I accompanied my father to Lakewood, New Jersey. My father wanted to visit Rabbi Cutler, Rabbi Aaron Cutler, Zeichat Tzaddik L'Bracha. He knew him from Europe. So we went. So then the Lakewood BMG was in a ramshackle farmhouse, and the office was on. You had to climb up a staircase that you didn't think you'd survive, or the staircase would survive. And he had 27 students in the yeshiva. So my father asked him, I remember I was 53, I was 16, something like that. So he asked him, how many students does Rosh Yeshiva think Lakewood's going to have? So he said, 50, efshar 100. 50, maybe 100. So there's another Aaron Cutler in Lakewood today, whom I know. So he told me, well, we're about 9,000 on the books now. And he's trying to get to 10,000 so that he can qualify as a university, and that the American government will have the great chelik in supporting Torah. Who imagines such a thing? Mimi Leile Avraham Meliko Bonim Sora. How could such a thing be? But we take it for granted. I spoke last week in Yeshiva University in their new base medrash. Unbelievable. Who would because I had been in Yeshiva University for decades, on and off, to visit and hear shiurim, etc. So even Rabbi Soloveitchik spoke, say he had 200 people, 300 people. We have rebuilt ourselves. And we have our Zaydas Tefillin in our hand. So I just was, before I came here, before Mordechai picked me up, so I was at a bris in Teaneck. And I had nothing to do with the Baalei Simcha, but it was convenient, rather than having to come all the way to the 5 towns to pick me up. And my son-in-law had to go to the bris, so I went to the bris. So at the bris, there were about about 300 men at the bris, and about 4 of them or 5 of them that you could tell were from the generation. They didn't have film, and they didn't quite know how to wear a yarmulke correctly, and they put on the old silk towels. But I remember when it was reversed. Well, there weren't so many people that put on film. But nobody wore a talis glove. So it's a changing time. And a great deal of that change is due to the fact that the state of Israel exists, because it pumped life back into the Jewish people. And that's why it's so important that we understand that and appreciate it and be grateful for it. But we have a lot of problems. We have Iran and we have Hezbollah and we have Hamas. I mean, the Lord has sent us a full plate. But my Arab street cleaner, whom I meet every morning on the way to shul, I have a great story about him that one year for Mishloach Monos, people sent us a very expensive box of Belgian chocolates, which is, I'm certain, what Queen Esther had in mind. And I searched as I could not find any rabbinic certification to the product. So I said to Jackie, I said, you know, I see Ahmed every morning on the way to shul, I'll give it to him. So I'm going to shul in the morning, and I see him. I said, good morning, Boker Tov, so I said, you know, I have a present for you. I gave him the box of chocolates. He says to me, what's wrong? It has no half share. So we understand each other. We really do. And the distance is not that great. The leadership is very poor. But the average, I took a poll of Arabs in East Jerusalem, if they want to join the Palestinian Authority, and 88% said no. And the man on the street is not as hateful to us as represented. But it takes time to sort this out. We made a lot of mistakes on the way. We pay for mistakes. But overall, the situation is much better. You know, Bismarck was once asked, well, what was the difference between Germany and Austria? So he said, the situation in Austria, the situation in Germany, he said, is serious but not hopeless. Whereas the situation in Austria is hopeless but not serious. Our situation is serious but not hopeless. We have great opportunities, both here and in Eretz Yisrael, to rebuild the Jewish people. But we have to realize the forces that we have to contend with. It's very hard to be a Shomer Shabbos when everybody's texting. It's very hard to appreciate what Shabbos is. Pesach, I don't mean to be unkind, but Pesach has been drowned in becoming a vacation and an escape. And you have an entire generation of Jews that think Pesach is a hotel. They don't remember a grandparents' Pesach. Don't remember those ideas. So we have our problems, that's good. Without problems, there's no life. But we should be of good hope because we've come a long way in 70 years. Very long way. And by renewing our strength, by revitalizing our spirit, by remaining strong and adamant in our value system and what we believe in. The Romans disappeared. The Greeks disappeared. This society will also disappear. It has to. It always has. Perhaps there are changes in America already. There's no question that the last election is a change, but how to sort it out, no one knows yet. And if we are what we are supposed to be, I can't speak for God. I will say that he hasn't spoken to me in the last 2 weeks, so I don't know. But I think that what we have seen until now will continue, and that we'll be privileged to see great and good things in the future. Because I'll say, V'nisan nigalu, v'nisan asivim ligoyah. The Jewish people were redeemed once, they'll be redeemed again. But we'll have to do it. We have to do our part. You can't just sit back and wait for it to happen. If you just sit back, so that's the ones that drop dead. And I really appreciate the fact that I had a chance to unburden myself here this morning to you and to share a few ideas. I want to bless each and every one of you, my dear friends, for all of the wonderful years that we had together. When it happens, you don't appreciate it. Later, you can't say thank you. But I appreciate it. And we should hear good news from each other and come see us in Yerushalayim. Thank you.